Yeah, okay, there we go. PNG is there.
Nice.
Welcome to the AFGHANEYE YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another AFGHANEYE Live. My name is Sangar Paykhar.
And I'm Ahmed-Waleed Kakar. Sorry guys, we're late today, and that's because the live stream that we've arranged today, as you could probably tell, has been organized a bit last minute, and that isn't sort of an accident. It's because of the pace in which developments in Afghanistan are going forward. I'm sure everyone here today that's watching, everyone that's listening, the hosts, myself, Habib Wardak, who's joined us today, alhamdulillah, and Sangar, we're obviously very keenly aware of the fact as to how quickly things are changing in Afghanistan. Now, usually, you guys know that we usually do our live streams on a Sunday, and generally on a Sunday afternoon. But as it turns, last Sunday have changed so much, as we'll see in the map that we've prepared, that quite frankly, unless there's a really good excuse, we can't afford to just ignore what's been happening over the last few days. So, Sangar, what's been happening? You know what? Well, sorry, not to be rude, Sangar. We've heard a lot from Sangar and myself on the Sunday stream, but today we have Habib Wardak, right? So, Habib, what do you make of what's been going on?
Okay, just make sure. Let me make sure that Habib is in visible because we just had a glitch. Is the stream on? Start streaming.
There we go. It says 9 people are watching.
All right. Okay, great. Habib, can you hear me?
I can hear you absolutely fine, yes.
All right, great. Excellent, Habib. Waleed, just one second.
It's saying that my voice is echoing for some reason. And my picture is also all over the place. Yeah.
That's because the internet is jumpy today. Okay. Just 1 second. Like this. Okay. Yes. We're sorry, guys. This is a little bit low tech. What you're seeing right now, but we are trying to fix it. Okay. Is there still an echo? Waleed, can you talk?
Hello.
Okay.
Someone is saying that your voice is too low. 2 people are saying that your voice is too low, Sangar.
All right. Okay. So. Yes. Is my voice better now? Can you guys
Someone
hear
is
me?
Someone is saying that it's just Waleed. I'm assuming that's the voice being distorted.
Yeah. I know what's going on. I know why the voice is distorted. But Habib, can you say something, please?
I can hear you guys perfectly fine, and I can see you.
All right.
I hope my voice is all right.
Yes, your voice is fine. Your voice is fine. Just one
Can
second.
we zoom out of my face, Sangar? I'm getting a bit creeped out, even though it's my own face.
Yeah, if I zoom out, it might shrink again because the bit rate of the internet connection is going up and down, and that's a problem they have right now in Kabul as well, by the way. They have no internet.
Yeah.
We have confirmed that there is no electricity and no internet tonight, right now, as we speak. Okay. Guys, in the chat, the echo is gone. Great. Usman Lee, thank you very much. Is the audio quality fine? Can you guys hear me? Okay, so the chat will respond with a little bit of A1. Thank you very much. Okay, so we can start. Before we start,
I would say just before we start,
yeah.
have you sent out a Twitter link?
Yes,
basically
yes,
telling
yes, yes, I have.
Tola Karuna Dikari. Alhamdulillah.
Well, first of all, I want to say welcome to Habib Wardak again, my dear respected brother. I am very delighted to have you as a guest again. We had so many positive feedback from our regular listeners and viewers. They were very happy to listen to your perspective, your analysis, and this is why I felt that it is necessary to call you on this short notice today. I know you are also very busy, so I'm also very grateful for the fact that you were ready to appear on our show today. So thank you very much for that. Before we start, I just wanted to know, have you been observing what has been happening today?
Yes.
Yes.
So first of all, it's an absolute pleasure, an immense pleasure to be here, and I hope we could get to offer something valuable to your valuable audience in terms of this 1 hour, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever live session that we have today. Yes, I have been observing the recent developments. The world, the analysts, Afghans are at shock because considering at the pace that it's happening. For me, no, because I had predicted this long back, 2016, 2014, when the international coalition was calling this a stalemate. You know,
Yeah.
in 2009, when you had the Obama surge, the press statements that would come from the Department of Defense, the White House, the Afghan government, the international community, we are on the verge of defeating. The ultimate victory is very close. You know, the counterinsurgency, the coin operations that they used to have. And I used to say the indicators show that it's not a taming insurgency. Victory is very far in terms of its sight. So hold on, the insurgency is intensifying. In 2014, suddenly the paradigm changed, and there was a change in the press statements. They started the introduction of this terminology, calling it a stalemate.
Yeah.
You still
Can,
had
Waleed, just 1 second. Habib, I want to ask you just in a moment why you thought back then that this is going to happen and what indicators were there present. But before we move on to that, I just want to check with Waleed. Is audio and everything now good, right, on your side?
I mean, are you asking if I can hear you well, or are you asking the
Yeah.
audience if they can hear me? Because I can hear you guys perfectly.
Okay. That's fine. Great. Okay. So just to do a short recap, today is Thursday, the 12th of August. On this day, Kandahar, the spiritual capital of Afghanistan, collapsed. Ghazni collapsed, and Herat. Any other places?
Badghis. I just
Halaya now.
Kalai now.
Halaya now
Okay.
in Badghis. And we're hearing that Lashkargah is on the verge of collapse. And we're also hearing that Tirinkot in Orozgan and Qalat in Zabul are also expected in the next 1 to 2 days. So that would take the total provincial count to about, what, 15, 16, right?
Yeah. And just before we went live, I saw several people from Logar saying that Mesainak is now taken by the Taliban. There are some activity in Pulalam, in Logar. So after Ghazni, Logar is even closer to the capital of Kabul. So this current pace of I don't even know how to call this the collapse of several cities. This is something unprecedented in the last 20 years of war in Afghanistan. So we are currently today in a very unusual situation. And our guest, Habib Wardak, already said that while most analysts and commentators are saying that this is so unexpected and this is such a surprise, there are those of us who say that this is actually something that could have been predicted years ago. And in order to explore the deeper causes of this collapse, we're going to talk to Habib Wardak. We're going to ask Habib Wardak. We will also talk about what is currently happening in Doha. There are negotiations currently as did the last round of negotiations start, Habib?
I think Waleed wants to answer that.
Yeah, please.
No. Sorry,
Sure.
it's Habib. It's your. I was going to suggest something else, but after you answer this question, then I'll sort of. So because, by the way, guys, for everyone that's listening, like I said, we only do the live streams on Sunday afternoon, and generally Habib doesn't join us. But today is an exceptional circumstance. We sort of had plans. We cancelled, I'm sure, plans on everyone else, just because the stuff that's happening in Afghanistan is so important. So the point I'm making is that there isn't sort of a script here, so just bear with us. Habib, you answer that question, and then because after that, I actually want to ask you, as a native of Jaratu Wardak, which has fallen, which fell to the Taliban a while ago, I want you, after you've answered this question, to walk us through how a district in the post-May 2021 paradigm collapses to the Taliban. But before that, tell us about the negotiations in Doha.
So before we actually go to negotiations, let's just first cover as of why are we here today?
Yes.
And why we should not be in shock. Why should we not be in a shock looking at the pace of these developments? Because these were bound to happen. I referred to the 2009 Obama surge.
Yes.
The statements that would come would be, victory is right around the corner. We will be there. We just need additional troops on the ground. But rather than taming the insurgency, you still had the intensifying insurgency. Night raid operations, air strikes, drone strikes, collateral damages were one of the biggest cause for the intensification of this insurgency. You had government after government in Kabul that started to blame Pakistan. Yes, Pakistan had a role in terms of the provision of sanctuaries to the Taliban across the line. Yes, that was there, but it was beyond that. The exclusiveness of the government in Kabul under the banner of democracy, giving shelter to notorious warlords such as Sayyaf, such as Dostum, and so on and so forth, and selling this notion of democracy to the Afghan people in rural villages under the shadow of American drones, airstrikes, night raid operation was not going to work. Pockets of foreign aid, which resulted in more capital outflow than capital inflow, was another reason. So it was more of an exclusive club built in Kabul, ignoring the rest of the population. And this was bound to happen. By 2014, you had intensified insurgency. Mind you, many districts, quite a few districts were already fallen into the hands of Taliban. If not districts, quite a few valleys have already fallen into the hands of Taliban. And then the United States, the Afghan government started coming with this idea of, a stalemate. It was not a stalemate. If you still have advances of the Taliban and the status quo for you is getting worsened and worsened and worsened, that is not a stalemate. It means that the Taliban are, advancing. It's a victory sign for them. Now, if you are happy with distortion of reality with the press statements, good for you, but it's not going to serve the cause. Fast forward from 2014 to 2020, you had districts after districts after districts falling into the hands of Taliban. First, it was not even districts, it was small little checkposts on highways, on strategic points between 2 or 3 districts. These checkposts were falling into the hands of Taliban, which basically meant that the line of communication for the Afghan government in various provinces and various districts and various valleys were becoming difficult. They were becoming abandoned. They were being left out. So it's basically following the Gestalt principle, where you merely now connecting the lines. Now, what happened in Wardak, for that matter of fact, because I can give a good picture of that, you had the Jagatu district. Jagatu district had roughly about 300 ANDSF soldiers in its base.
Since and so I want to dissect this like very well. So, you know, our audience, some are Afghan, some are non-Afghan, some are not from rural parts. So in order to give like a really, deep understanding of what these districts are like. So Jaratu is a district of Wardak province, southwest of Kabul. There's the district center. What's the district center called?
The district center of Jagatu is called the Jagatu itself.
Jagatu itself. And there are 300 ANDSF in the military compound in Jagatu district center.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And the military protocol talks about changing these 300 soldiers every 6 months. Now, since 2014, when the highway that connects Kabul to Ghazni and then subsequently Kandahar was under government control, they would do these logistics and also changing their personnel every 6 months. But all the time it resulted in ANDSF casualties because, you know, it was about guerrilla warfare.
So why was there an emphasis on rotation of personnel?
Because you can't keep a soldier in a checkpost in a base for more than 6 months without taking a holiday. So they need to have fresh soldiers coming in.
Yeah.
The older gets to have some rest. By 2016-17, mind you, logistics in terms of the road transportation was now impossible. IEDs, highway now under constantly Taliban threat. Saidabad being threatened, Wardak being threatened. So road transportation was too costly for the Afghan government. And whatever that happened was through air support. The food, ammunitions, logistics, and changing soldiers. Now, obviously, it is also costly in terms of finances. So they started doing that once a year. And mind you, since 2014, up to 2020-21, you never had a soldier coming out of that base and patrolling in the villages of Jagatu, roughly about 110 villages.
And just to make this clear for people, Wardak is a province that it borders Kabul. Okay, so for people to this isn't a very remote area, let's say very far away from Kabul. It borders Kabul as a province. It lies, let's say, on the motorway, that on the ring road kind of thing that connects the major urban cities like Ghazni, like Kandahar. So once again, I'm not speaking for you, Habib, but just so people understand, I'm asking these questions so, you know, we can get a better picture. We're talking about the province that lies immediately to the southwest of Kabul since 2014 is under active Taliban threat. There's an active Taliban presence to the extent that air support is the only way in which logistics and supply can be facilitated.
Yes, but it was possible back in 2014 because you hardly had 15, 20 districts such as Jagatu across the country which were facing similar problem. But now when that is shifting to about 60, 70 different districts, which requires air supply, now that becomes unfeasible for the government in Kabul. Mind you, since 2014, people were also cut off from accessing the provincial center. If you required a national ID card, which was basically a paper where the government district center is supposed to give it to you, you had to go to the provincial center because A, the district office did not have that. Two, the Taliban presence in the district. They had their shadow governor, they had their judiciary, they had their police, they had everything was run by the Taliban, including monitoring the health activities, the education department, monitoring of schools, the polio campaigns. Everything was done by the shadow Taliban government.
Okay, I'm really glad you mentioned that. Okay, so we know that the schools aspect is a flashpoint of propaganda, right? But we also know that to some extent it's not unjustified. It varies on a regional district basis. Commanders have their say. What was it like in Jaratu?
So in Jagatu, it was basically an introduction of one Islamic module,
Okay,
which was more of which is I'm not very good at it. It was the Talimul Islam,
okay,
which is basically how do you pray, the times of prayer, how do you do wudu and all of that.
okay,
And they had to remove another module from the classes, which was basically the civil studies. Talked about the Afghan flag, the Afghan constitution, the democracy, and all of that. So they had to remove that, and
okay,
instead of that, they brought in another module, which was made mandatory to every student.
okay.
But coming back to our point, Walid Jana, now if highway is becoming under complete Taliban control, if Chak is falling, now it's just a matter of time before Jagatu falls.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, Jagatu did not fall because the soldiers fought. The soldiers did not fight. Yes, they resisted it for a very, very long time. They defended themselves for a very long period of time. But then after that, it was useless because you don't have any supply coming, you don't have any logistics coming, you don't have any moral support, you have not been paid your salary for months, which is roughly $150 a month.
I'm
So why?
sorry, just 1 second. Did this specific point of people not being paid their salaries and not receiving food or even ammunition, this is being claimed by so many people. We've seen soldiers on social media posting about it. There is so much being said about this, but the people in government say that it's not true. Like there is a guy, Nawid Kausi, he's a colonel of at the Ministry of Interior Affairs, and he's on Twitter attacking everyone and saying that this is not true and that everyone is paid their due salaries, all soldiers, all police officers. So how is it possible that he claims that everyone is being paid, but on the same time you claim and others claim that no, they are not being paid?
Sangar Jana, the government also claims that this is not a defeat, this is more of a strategic retreat, which does not correspond with reality. So the government will come up with all sorts of statements to try to save its face, but it doesn't just stop at not paying their salaries. It's quite factual that the group that was brought into Jagatu was actually brought for training into the Dashito Police Training Center. So they were told that you were going for a week or two of training into Dashito base and you'll be brought back to Kabul. But choppers instead, they brought them and put them in Jagatu district center, and they had to resist that for 6-7 months.
So they were tricked.
They were tricked. Absolutely, they were tricked. They were tricked. They did not know that they were going to Jagatu. They had enlisted. They were newly enlisted. They were supposed to be trained in the Dashtitop Center. And then instead of going to the Dashtitop Police Training Academy, they were brought into Jagatu. And here you go. You're on your own. Now your job is to defend Jagatu Center. Now going beyond Wardak in Jagatu, this model is everywhere. Look at Kunduz. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 district falls, and the world is not a shock because of the pace that these 7 districts have fallen. And now suddenly the only district, the provincial capital, which is left sieged under Taliban sort of circle, no ammunition coming, no logistics coming, all sorts of corruption within the leadership, and you expect that to not fall? It's going to fall automatically. It's a domino effect. It's going to fall automatically. But the paradox over here is that you don't try to stop them when taking over, let's say, Khanabad. But when they take over Kunduz, suddenly you have your strategic bombers, you have your Afghanistan Air Force
And
bombing.
why is that? Why is that in some areas they bombard the entire city like they did in Kunduz and Lashkargah? They killed hundreds of people. They burned shops, mosques, even hospitals were bombed. It was in Lashkargah, that private hospital that was bombed recently. But why does that happen in Kunduz and Lashkargah, but not in other areas? What is the reason for this?
Sangarjan, imagine you don't know how to swim, okay?
Okay.
And suddenly there's you're in a flood, okay, and you're taken by waters, and you see that somewhere down the line, within a matter of few minutes, it's the end of your life, okay? And to rescue yourself, you see a bush somewhere in the water, and you try to hang yourself onto the bush, thinking that this will save you. This is the mindset that you deploy your air force. Maybe this is what is going to scare them, and this is going to have them retreated. You will be able to safeguard the city. End of the day, you had so many strategic ops communications, where you talked about that this is not going to fall. You're gonna defend it at whatever cost. How much confidence you had built into the Afghan people that this is not going to fall, and suddenly it's falling. All of what you had said and bragged about is suddenly a distortion of reality.
Can we interpret the carpet bombing of urban centers like Lashkargah and like Kunduz, especially areas that, like Sangar said, are in the center of the city, the commercial sort of districts? Can we interpret that as collective punishment in a way?
Collateral damage, collective punishment, whatever you want to name it. But
can we infer from that in some instances the government wants to punish locals? Is that a sound? Because I've heard people making that claim that the government is doing this to sort of teach locals a lesson. Can we infer that, or is it just a sort of a knee-jerk reaction to sort of inflict some damage?
This statement goes back to another debate that has been happening since 2002, 2003. Every time, Walijana, you had a night raid operation on a civilian people, or a drone attack, killed one Taliban, but killed 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 local men. And the response that would come would be, why are you allowing Taliban into your homes?
Okay.
But the response of these locals would have been, see, I'm a soldier. I'm a farmer. I have no guns to stop them. Your responsibility is to stop them from coming to my house.
Yeah.
The government would call them empathizers of the Taliban.
Yeah, sympathizers.
So sympathizers.
Yeah.
Now, if you're calling them sympathizers of the Taliban, and on the other side, what you're doing is you're calling yourself as the representative of the Afghan government. And you're calling your people sympathizers of the Taliban. Now, these two statements do not collaborate with each other.
Okay.
So if they are if the people in rural Afghanistan are the sympathizers of the Taliban, and if your legitimacy comes from the people, where you people are sympathizers of the Taliban, and understanding that majority of the Afghan people live in rural Afghanistan, then I don't think you really belong there.
Yeah,
you understand that.
So we can sort of establish, and I would agree that the rationale of collective punishment has been a feature of the war on terror as Afghanistan has experienced it via the government. Okay, so I want to take this back to your district, Jaghatun. Okay, so everyone here has seen the maps of Afghanistan, the different district colored maps. Taliban controlled, government controlled, contested. Now, a lot of the times what contested means is, like in Jaghatun, the government forces are basically locked up, holed up in a district military center, compound, whatever you want to call it. They don't really come out of the district center. In some cases, they don't come out of the compound itself. And outside the district center, outside the compound, especially at night, the Taliban rule, right? Now, was that the case in Jaghatun?
That's a very, very good question.
Okay.
In fact,
I'm asking you, just give me a second, right? So how in Jagatu did you go from, let's say, the Taliban ruling outside the compound to them coming into the district center and seizing it? What happened? What was the role of, let's say, local? It's a tribal sort of local society. What was the role of local elders, etc., etc.? What happened?
So first thing first, let's talk about the maps first. A lot of
Uh-huh.
these maps that are being circulated, so the long war journals are doing it, BBC have done it now, Al Jazeera is doing it. They have their own maps as of who controls, which area is controlled by who.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of problem with those maps,
Mm-hmm.
primarily because even the government maps that I had once seen, where Jagatu was green, meaning that it's under government control.
Yeah.
And it was because they only controlled that district center. They could
Yeah.
not step outside that district center. And across the 110, 112 villages, it was the Taliban rule, the shadow governance, the judiciary, everything A to Z. They were roaming freely. Yes, you had night raid operations, drone strikes, excuse me, and everything. So, but on the maps, it was shown green. That is as if it's the government control. For example, in Herat, you had 6, 7 districts already fallen completely to the hands of Taliban. A few other contested where you have the government in those centers across the districts is the Taliban control, and the city of Herat is basically government. Now, the entire map of Herat is shown, for example, green, and that is not correct.
Yeah, of course.
That is not correct. In reality, it should be the other way around, because who has more influence?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what it is. Even today, if you look at where the government controls those district centers, and you take that advantage from them and say, okay, let's assume that this is controlled by the Taliban, I am sure that the map will look completely different. It'll be all red, except those small little points, Kabul, maybe Jalalabad, Kunar, here and here, a little bit of green, and then or white, whatever you want to color it, and the rest, everything is gonna be red.
Mm-hmm.
So that is number one. Your question number two was, sorry.
So I was saying, talk us through how that changed. The district center itself being taken over by the Talibs. Was it a military takeover? Was it a negotiated surrender? And if it was a negotiated surrender, what was the modus operandi? What role did local leaders play? You said that your father is currently in Jagatu in Wardak as well. Like, talk us through that.
So basically how this entire phenomena works, not just in Jagatu, across Afghanistan, is, it's a very tribal society. First thing first, when the Taliban started coming with their propaganda warfare, and showing videos of how they let the prisoners of war go, give them money so that they could return to their homes, and how they're hugging them, that played a lot of role. Because threat perception among the ANDSF was that if you surrender, you will not be reaching your home. You'll be slaughtered. All right. So that was number one. So that brought in a lot of confidence. Number two was that because the Taliban couldn't approach the district center. So in a lot of districts across the country, you had the local elders who were not part of the government, who were not part of the Taliban. What they did was they started to mediate. They went up to them that basically you surrender, you're being completely cut off, you're completely being sort of forgotten. And there is a lot of grievances amongst these soldiers. They're coming from extremely poor backgrounds. Two, a lot of them, majority of them, they are not able to read and write. Forget about notions and concepts such as democracy and republic, understanding those concepts. So they're there for those a couple of $100 a month, equivalent to Afghani, so that they could feed their children. Now, once they are not paid, once they are completely cut off, there is nothing for them to fight for. And knowing that they have a chance to get to their families, and now you have local elders who enjoys a lot of credibility in the Afghan tribal society, mediating and saying that we will ensure that you get to have that safe passage. And within and the sieges there, one odd firefight is there, and then 3 days later you'll realize that they have surrendered, giving all of their caches, their weapons, their vehicles, whatever that was there in position has been handed over to the Taliban. In return, they get to have safe passage. This is primarily what happened to the Afghan governor in Ghazni today, which was handcuffed by the NDS, the security service, at the gate of Kabul and the Wardak's provincial capital.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in one way or the other he did the right thing, to call a spade, because
I'm sure the NDS would take massive issue with that statement, but yeah, I agree.
No, because the thing is, because once, so what you have the Yak, you have Khwaja Umari, you have Andar, you have Makwar, you have those important areas that Rishidan, that surrounds Ghazni. They have already completely fallen to the hands of Taliban.
Mm-hmm.
You're completely.
I think they've taken Karabakh as well.
Karabakh as well. I forgot to mention that. So you're completely cut off from Kabul. The highway that runs through Wardak is under complete Taliban control through Saidabad.
Mm-hmm.
So fighting does not make any sense. You will not have reinforcements coming to you.
Mm-hmm.
With the thing that Ghani was he would always brag about were those special operation forces, the commandos. Now they are overstretched. They are too thin, and bringing 50, 100 into Ghazni center doesn't make any sense. They'll result in loss, like what happened in North.
Okay. Habib, we are going to talk about this in more detail later on. I just want to take a short break and talk about something that is even more urgent. Before we do that, we have already discussed that Kandahar has fallen to the hands of Taliban. In Kandahar city, in the last couple of weeks, there were all sorts of skirmishes around the city. And Waleed, you have relatives in Kandahar. I spoke to you in private. You told me that your relatives have been hearing sporadic gunfire, etc., in the last couple of weeks. What is the situation right now with your family, your relatives? What is the latest news from Kandahar?
So probably the most painful part is the fact that there is no news, and that is because locally internet is kind of cut off after 6 o'clock. So the situation in Kandahar, we've discussed it over the last couple of live streams over the last couple of weeks. So we know that, just as Habib talked about this sort of campaign across rural Afghanistan of district centers being taken over, we saw that happening in Kandahar as well. We saw, sorry, I nearly spoke Pashto there. We saw Jari sort of district center being besieged. The Taliban took Arghandab. They took Panjwai, places like this, and then obviously they took Wardak. Now, with regard to Kandahar, and in that fighting, there were obviously reports that the Taliban, locally, the Taliban fighters had gone into people's homes, essentially kicked them out, and basically said, go to the city center because this is basically a war zone and you need to get out, right? And if you guys, I don't know if you guys are aware, but Mullah Yaqub, who was the son of Mullah Omar, recently came out with an audio statement basically saying, protect people's properties, etc., etc. And in some way, I guess that would reflect that on the ground, the political sort of side of the organization or even the military superiors are finding it difficult to control events on the ground and fighters on the ground. But in any case, now, yesterday, 2 days ago, I sort of received the news that my relatives who were living in what is called Mirwais Mina in Kandahar city, sort of on the outskirts of Kandahar city, but Kandahar city nonetheless, they had fled. They'd become displaced, and that was because they were saying that it was just raining bullets. And the Taliban had sort of come to the streets and shouted at everyone, like, you know what, leave, There's war going on. You're gonna die. There may be airstrikes. Leave. So it wasn't the same in the sense that they'd sort of kicked people out of their homes, but these people were sort of forced to leave their homes and go towards the city center. It is the hottest summer in God knows how long in Kandahar. So a lot of these people are, especially if you understand sort of local custom and culture, the fact that women are sort of sleeping without, without any roof over their head or without any privacy is sort of a disgrace, to put it shortly, if you understand local custom and culture, not just because of the weather, but because it's seen as sensitive locally. Now, today, I know Mina, which is sort of a new model township in Kandahar.
We had
We had
architect
Abdul.
of the
We had the honor of hosting Abdul Hamid Hilmandi, who was the architect of the Aino Mina township, and he basically tried to create this sort of model, sort of American style township in Kandahar during the Taliban emirate, funnily enough. But Aino Mina lies towards the east of Kandahar city. It's part of the city, it's on the east. Today, I received news that the Taliban was sort of in and around Aino Mina. So if we picture, and I'm so sorry, guys, that I'm not able to demonstrate this on the map because I know everyone has sort of said the maps are great, but this live stream is sort of a last minute thing. I don't think any of us came fully prepared. But in any case, if we consider that I
can switch to the map. Just 1 second. Just bear with me.
It's not the map. It's not the map of Kandahar city, though.
Yeah.
You see.
Ah.
But listen.
Okay.
So
all right.
If I have
carry
relatives,
on, carry on.
So by the way, this is just sort of my family experience. It's not in the, representative or a sample of all of Kandahar, but just speaking as someone with family in Kandahar, my family towards the west of the city have been displaced. The next day, 2 days afterwards, towards the east of the city, there's news that the that the Taliban are coming towards the east of the city. Then I received news that videos rather that they're in Dekhwaja, which is sort of east central city. Dekhwaja is actually where my mother's school was. It was called Dar al Muallimin, okay, the home of sort of students, teachers, whatever. And then by that point, I'd spoken to my family and they were all sort of okay. They were all okay, but then at about 4:30, 5 o'clock British time, which is about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock local time, we got videos of the Taliban basically walking in and around what is called Shahidanu Chowk, the Martyrs Square. And they're in Shahidanu Chowk, which is like the landmark of Kandahar, if you will. And so they're in the center of the city. Since then, unfortunately, I haven't really been able to connect with my relatives. Electricity is not so bad. News is scarce. Internet is sort of cut off generally after 6 o'clock. So it's whilst it seems that the city sort of collapsed or the government forces collapsed with little resistance, which means that bloodshed would have been is more limited than otherwise. The sad reality is that I have no idea if family have been displaced, if family have died. I have no idea.
And this kind of uncertainty and total lack of any sort of communication right now in Kandahar, for how long do you think that this is going to last? Do you have any sort of idea that maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, someone else from your relatives, people you do have contact with, that they might be able to reach out to your relatives in Kandahar?
Yeah, so I have other relatives in Kabul, and I've sort of, in the absence of my relatives in Kandahar, I've sort of just spammed them and asked them if everything is okay. But even in Kabul, they're having internet and electricity issues as well. I spoke to one relative who said that the last time he spoke to my Kandahari relatives or relatives living in Kandahar, there was still fighting going on. in the streets and in the bazaars. So there was still fighting going on. The signal was really bad. I didn't actually get to ask him whereabouts in the city there was fighting. But when the last time he heard from them in Kabul, there was fighting. And so I've basically decided or told everyone, like, as soon as you get any sort of update, please let me know. So we're now we've come full circle, and I tweeted something earlier, and a lot of people I actually tweeted about my family being displaced, and I think there was one person that was like, oh, um jihadi offspring, you glorified the Taliban and look at what they did. But the thing is that, I mean, it's pretty low to try rubbing that in my face. It's pretty classless. But on top of that, the reason no one was glorifying the Taliban, we were always in favor of the Doha process. And the reason we were in favor of the Doha process is that, like, I also have family in Shamali. And in the 90s, there was a scorched earth campaign in Shamali. The village, orchard, like vineyards, trees, everything was burnt down. And I sort of follow a realist perspective, which is that as long as there is war, there will be war crimes. Okay. And modern warfare, especially, is pretty brutal. And because, let's say, my village has been burnt down, and I've you know, for those of us with family on both sides, we don't want them to kill each other, right? Because we know them personally, we have blood familial ties with them. And we knew that if the Doha process failed, even one extra person dying is one extra person too much. So, contrary to the claims of, look at what the Taliban did, well, strictly speaking, it wasn't the Taliban. But even if it was the Taliban that, let's say, killed my family members, it would only vindicate my point. And the point was that a negotiated settlement is best. You know, this isn't the time. Uh, I mean, I'm sure people can tell. I'm sort of pretty upset about it. I've been thinking about it all day. Even at work, I was distracted. Maybe I'm rambling on too much right now, but this is the reality of war. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of diaspora people sort of saying that the Taliban must be resisted and they must be fought against. And I understand that they're passionate and they're zealous and whatever. But the Americans couldn't defeat the Taliban. The current government cannot defeat the Taliban. The only way forward is a negotiated settlement. In the war, in any war, the people suffer the most. As I'm sure Habib can relate with me, his father, his family have been victim of night raids. I'm sure you as well, Sangar. I know De Sabs is very insecure from a, you know, there's a lack of security there. We have the privilege and the benefit, as much as people like to remind us about it, we're not blind to it. We have the privilege and the benefit of living in safety. And because we have the privilege and the benefit of living in safety, we actually talk against escalation of hostilities and war. That's something for which I'll never actually be apologetic or embarrassed about. And yeah, that's, you know, we have family who have seen war. My father was involved in the Soviet jihad. Once again, it's not something I'm embarrassed about. If someone wants to call me jihadi offspring, you know, that's their opinion. It is what it is. But let them come forth and tell us what their fathers did, right? But in any case, that's just the way it is. And it's pretty upsetting that I actually got to this stage where we had a lack of political will to move forward with a political process as deeply flawed as it was. And we are where we are. So I guess I'll have to wait until the internet is reactivated in Kandahar to hear what's actually happened. And once again, sorry for taking the mic for so long, but I think there are certain things that sort of need to be said. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think it's necessary because thank you very much for your honesty, and I think also it's necessary to talk about how the topics that we regularly talk about here in the podcast, etc., that it actually affects us personally. We
and the thing, sorry to interrupt
yeah.
you as well. I understand that you know, in your demeanor or perhaps in my demeanor, we may come across as very distant, but that's done from a perspective that is there's a lot of propaganda and emotionalism and emotional blackmail that's attached to misinformation, and in order to critically engage with the realities and the events ongoing in Afghanistan, we kind of have to step out of ourselves for a second, because if you and I go by what our immediate family or what we went through, that's not the entirety of the reality encompassing Afghanistan. In order to critically do what we have to do, we have to step out of ourselves for at least a 1 hour podcast. Even if we hold our own fears, our own anxieties, our own worries, that's just the way it is. And so you're 100% right. It does affect us. It does affect us. What can I say, man? Honestly, I don't have much else to add to that in that regard.
No, thank you very much. I think yes, I wanted you to tell the story of your own relatives because obviously it's something that is playing up right now. It is disturbing us. I have relatives in Kabul who are currently, alhamdulillah, they're safe. The ones who live inside the city. Uh, there are there's a lot of crime. I know a few episodes back I discussed how my nephews were robbed, my cousins were robbed with knives. One of them was stabbed. Those are the types of insecurity and threats that my relatives um, have endured in the last couple of years in Kabul. But the brutal force of war has always been limited to areas outside the city, except some explosions, bombings, and more recently the rocket attacks, etc. So I consider myself as very fortunate and lucky that most of my relatives have been safe so far, and I pray that Allah keeps them safe. But when we talk about politics, when we talk about what is best for Afghanistan and what should happen, it is out of real, genuine concern for our people who we care about, people who are dear to us. The fact that we sit here for hours and hours and talk about our home country, it's because we love our people. We identify as one of them, as we see them as part of us, and advocating for negotiations and peace, etc. All these matters that we have discussed in the last year and a half here on Afghan Eye, it was all meant because of what we feel and what we know that might happen and what could happen to people in Afghanistan. So I want to move on, but I want to also just make sure, Habib, are you still in contact with your father? How is he right now?
Yes. So first of all, I'm very sorry, Wali Jana, to hear all of this. There is no doubt that right now we, as in Afghanistan, is on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe. Um, Looking at the amount of IDPs going from one center to another center, from one province to another province, understanding the lack of incompetency and corruption and incapability of the Afghan government, and not much from the Taliban side as well, because there is no funding, there is no capacity. I understand to respond to that kind of humanitarian.
And it's not much of a priority, it must be said as well.
Yes. So it's very unfortunate. To be honest, speaking to my family and my relatives in Wardak, they are pretty safe now, because what I've been hearing is that there is no drone, there is no night raid operation, there is no government presence, and in fact no Taliban presence as well.
How is that possible? So the
Because
government is gone?
The Taliban have also gone, because now they are focusing on the cities.
Okay.
The districts are in their control. So it's a very chilled life out there, sort of,
But
in a way.
but doesn't that create a vacuum for criminals, for armed groups to?
No, no. So when I say no Taliban, that means a very limited presence.
Okay.
I mean a very limited presence. So, but if it never makes sense, just because one district or one or two districts are safe and good in terms of security, and the rest of the country is burning in turmoil, it just doesn't make sense, and it's a very, very unfortunate situation. This could have been avoided in 2018. This could have been avoided in 2019 and 2020. But when you have somebody who is just so fond of power, so fond of obtaining more and being called the president, and having in this delusional world where he thinks he has fixed up the entire country, this is where we lead to. This is where we lead to. Still calling for international military assistance. I don't know where are we off to. It is still not very late. It is still not very late. Doha process is sluggish. It's slow. Some people call it dead, but it is an option. It is still there. There is no other way out. Either
I want to
either
ask you just a
Sure.
brief question. If the Doha process was initiated in February of 2020, when there were still Germans, I think Canadians, there were even Italians, British, and American troops in Afghanistan, and everything was intact. If it didn't result into meaningful negotiation, how can it result into anything meaningful now when all those troops are gone and half of the country is being run over by the Taliban? So what kind of leverage will the government have? How can they negotiate when they're basically on their back feet?
So I'll try to simplify this whole Doha process as of why it's so sluggish. When it started, um, before the intra-Afghan dialogue, there was something called the Doha process, which involved the Taliban and the United States of America. Eventually, the United States tried to bring in the confidence of its partners, such as the UK, Germany, other European powers, and they negotiated. Now, that was the first biggest blow to the Afghan government, because what it implied was that the United States of America, Uncle Sam, now gets to talk to a non-state actor about the fate of a nation state. So that provided enough legitimacy, enough credibility that the Taliban ever dreamt of and wanted. So that basically brought in this whole concept of inferiority complex as far as Ashraf Ghani is concerned. I'm trying to be very, very sort of blunt. Ghani's whole objective was that, try to sabotage this as much as you can, because Ghani was living in a delusional world. When we kept telling that these forces will not be here, when we kept talking that the perception and the general public support of the Western world has fallen down in terms of supporting their military in Afghanistan, they wouldn't listen to. The response would come, have you seen the Shindand air base? How much of investment the Americans have done? Do you think they're stupid that they're going to leave? Have you seen Bagram Air Base? They even have Burger King over there. Do you think they'll leave? Forget about that.
And KFC.
And KFC. And have you seen
KFC die hier Nussi.
And have you seen the infrastructure that they have built in the American embassy? They're here for a very long time. They have a strategic mindset. Shindan fell yesterday or today into the hands of Taliban. Bagram, they just evacuated and left it to the Afghan army overnight. And it's a matter of time when the Taliban will take over that, looking at the pace of these developments. And they started coming up with these red lines. Republic is my red line. The republic that you have made a mess of, that you do not yourself respect, the constitution that you do not yourself adhere to. And he started coming up with those thinking that these bottlenecks that he's trying to create will give him more time in terms of his presidency. Because if you get to talk about interim government and you happen to live in Kabul, that you're gonna get disappeared. You're gonna have threats. You're gonna have all sorts of problems. And the general Afghan formula and the global formula for conflict resolution is you can't have them evaporate, you can't have them demolish, you can't have them uproot, they can't uproot you. So you're stuck in this, but they're slightly like gaining momentum. The best way would be, have an interim government, a neutral government, and then talk about a setup. Stop this bloodshed. But this was a red flag, because we get to talk about republic. We are here to sort of safeguard the principles of republican democracy. This is what we are here for. But in reality, that was not true. The elections was a mess. The corruption, the parliament that is there because of corruption gets to sort of reject a minister, and the minister still gets to sit there for 2-3 years. So if you're not respecting yourself and adhering to the constitution yourself, how do you expect the Afghans to believe it? But now the tables have changed. Ghani was sluggish. Now, no matter how much Ghani wants to have that Doha process succeed, given if he wants that, now the Taliban will believe that, with the momentum that they have, that whole western belt, starting from Herat, Nimroz, Farah, Helmand, Kandar. Now Waleed was talking about Tarinkot and Oruzgan. Then you get to Ghazni, and then I was just reading on Twitter. I don't know, I can't verify this, but apparently Maidan Wardak has also fallen into the hands of Taliban.
You mean Maidan Shar, like
Maidan
the
Shar,
provincial
yes,
capital? Yeah.
the provincial capital. So that entire western belt has fallen. North is fallen, with the exception of Mazar. I mean, there's not much left. So why will the Taliban now basically agree to settle for a settlement when they think that absolute victory is possible? They have missed on golden opportunities, not once, not twice, not thrice, numerous times. Dawood, the Laghmani, the governor for Ghazni, I couldn't complete that. He basically gave up. He negotiated his evacuation, which was a good thing in a way, because that resulted in safeguarding and prevention of a lot of civilian bloodshed in Ghazni, destruction of property and infrastructure. But he is handcuffed. You see, you did not stop them when they were taking over Makur, when they were taking over Dayag, Khwaja Omari, Rishidan, and there. You didn't stop them, or you couldn't stop them. But when they take over Ghazni center, which is just trying to complete this whole structure, that suddenly becomes a shocking news. This was bound to happen. Now there is somebody who is trying to save a civilian life and bloodshed, and he is handcuffed.
This is something that I think is very difficult for many people outside Afghanistan, people outside the war zone, to actually understand, is that someone who is put in charge of an area where there are people living their normal day-to-day lives, okay, whether they're poor or rich, pro-government or neutral or anti-government, it doesn't matter. You have just regular families, Afghan families, with their children, what God knows, farm animals, whatever. You go there and you're put in charge of that area, and you're told you're responsible for their security and well-being, and then you are surrounded and you have the choice. Either I put up a fight and risk having all these people either injured or even worse, killed, for the sake of people in Kabul who are totally not affected by this current situation there, or I just say, you know what, I will just leave and then make sure that nobody dies. This is not rocket science,
With all
It's treason. How dare you?
With all due respect, Sangarjana, there's one little bit of the repercussions of what is going to happen. Now, tomorrow, for example, if XYZ province falls into the hand of Taliban, the governor will not try to run away to Kabul. They will instead join the Taliban, knowing that this is going to happen.
Because they know that NDS and Amrullah Saleh are going to detain them.
It's a positive sign, and you know, fighting would have happened. Fighting would have happened had Laghmani known that, you know, this fighting would result in his victory, but it wouldn't, because he's completely cut off. There is no logistics. There is no morale in his soldiers to fight. Fight for what? You know.
Regarding fighting, I know I'm constantly breaking you up, but there are so many things that you discuss that I need to interject. Okay, there is something you alluded to earlier, and if you can, please, since you have most of the knowledge about this matter, please explain. How is war being fought right now by the government? You said that the special forces are doing the bulk of the fighting, correct? And how are they being transported, those special forces? How many special forces are there in total? And do you have any indication of what their capability is with regards to, like, for instance, defending one particular major city, like, let's say, Herat or Mazar or Kandar?
See, to be honest, I do not know the exact number of the special operation forces. But when you look at conflict at such a wide scale,
sorry to cut you off, Habib. It's about the same thing, though. Whilst you were at the Ministry of Defense for that short period of time, what was the rough number then?
I think they were talking about 10,000.
Okay.
10,000.
Okay.
Looking at the scale of conflict from north to south, south to east to west, you know, they become too stretched. And the issue of logistics. You can't have 300 men defend an entire city. You can, but for how long? For how long? The corps that was there in Helmand, the entire corps, led by General Sameh Sadat. Now, it tried to resist, but the question is, for how long can you do that when you're cut off? For how long can you do that? Now, the other thing I wanted to bring your attention to is, well, Jana, you brought a very good point. When there is war, certainly you will have war crimes, because war in its nature is very brutal. And this is what I keep telling. Fight for what? What we need to have instead is ensure that this bloodshed stops. This whole shouts of republic, democracy, and these cosmetic values that have, you know, nothing transcends the value of human blood. Nothing transcends the value of human blood. If you have seen blood within your entire family, within your family, you will know what it means. For as long as, if this bloodshed could stop, everything else could be worked towards, whether it's values in terms of elections, free media, press, women rights, you know, these all things could be worked towards too. But first and foremost thing, this bloodshed needs to stop. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about notions such as, you know, and the other thing is what they're doing. Ghani and his men in Kabul, they are very good with running propaganda warfare that doesn't make any sense, that doesn't hold any value. Go on to Twitter, find a hashtag and run that hashtag. Not responding to the issue of IDPs, not able to protect centers, provinces, districts, where you call yourself as the legitimate government of the Afghanistan and the custodian of the constitution, where a very important article in the Afghan constitution says that you know, the government, the state has the responsibility to protect life. And you basically
I mean, quite frankly, right? And let's approach this from a a Western political sort of philosophy, right? What is the role of the state if its role is like if it's not securing lives and property? Does it even have a social contract?
It shouldn't.
So,
It
like
shouldn't.
when we talk about a Hobbesian reality, when we talk about the state of nature, if if there's an organization calling itself a state, but there's a state of nature that's predominant across the territory that it claims to govern, is it really a state? Can it really claim the acquiescence of the inhabitants over which it presumes to govern? And that is something that it took me a while to sort of wrap my head around, because at one stage I was like, you know what, there's a brutal insurgency, uh, all these sorts of things. It's difficult to do so. But then I thought to myself, but hang on, there is still room for accountability here, right? If you're backed up by 45 countries of the most powerful military alliance that the world has ever seen in mankind's history, right? You can't, you can't just blame it all on Pakistan. Insurgencies have different causes. One of them is external support or sanctuary. And if the corruption is eye-watering, and a lot of the times we talk about corruption, 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 and it almost becomes a buzzword, just like women's rights and democracy and gains of the last 20 years become a buzzword on the government side. But when we talk about corruption, we're talking about, I think there's an Indian scholar, Ashok Swain, that basically he tweeted the other day, out of every $100 that is earmarked for Afghanistan by the international community, $20 reaches the common Afghan, right? That is eye-watering. What happens with the Ponzi scheme being operated in Kabul Bank, in which the president's brothers were involved, and the presidential office was used to acquit those brothers, that was eye-watering. So it's not where a lot of the times we talk about corruption, and we know about it sort of on the local scale, sort of your family go to a checkpoint, they have to give rishwat. The guy at the checkpoint is a bit of a wank. Sorry, he's the guy at the checkpoint is he's not a nice guy. He asks for 500, 1,000, 5,000 Afghani, right? That's because we don't have connections at the ARG. That's the corruption we encounter. But the higher you go, the dirtier and the more it gets. And so with all of that in mind, is there really a social contract? Has there been a social contract? Because if we think of it, right, we don't want to be anachronistic here. When the Americans invaded Afghanistan, there wasn't much resistance against them from the common men, right? Even in the South. And there's a scholar, David Mansfield, who's really good with heroin and supply chain and distribution. He talks about how the Taliban's attempt to ban opium, to ban the cultivation of opium in 2000, they did that in order to gain international legitimacy. They failed in doing that, obviously, but they also infuriated local farmers, right? And bread is bigger than any ideology, right? So we can say that at the beginning, there was this somehow maybe flawed, maybe inaccurate perception that this is not a full-fledged military occupation, because the US didn't come and put 150,000 soldiers on the ground immediately. It escalated as time went on. But even with, let's say, the high turnout in the 2004 election, with the general indifference to the Taliban being removed from power, what happened afterwards, with all of the money that was flooded in?
So, Walijan, I'll try to answer your question with a simple question.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that answers your question. 40 plus strong military powers backing you up militarily, billions of dollars of aid coming into the country and being wasted or spent on notions such as capacity building, institution building, infrastructural development. All the international legitimacy that you have had, having the United Nations seat, your embassies, your good offices, all of the legitimacy and credibility that you gained from the international media, the likes of New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, you name it, talking about notions such as democracy, how it's a success in Afghanistan. And you still lose to people wearing sandals and riding motorcycles. And eventually, not even one.
As Dostum said.
Yes, as Dostum said, riding motorcycles. Let's assume, let's agree, backed by Pakistan. With the provision of safe havens and logistics and support, whatever. And if you recall, last elections, not even 2 million people turning up to the elections. Do you call this a social contract? There has to be something seriously wrong within the infrastructure of the system that is built. It's not acceptable to the Afghans. If it was acceptable to the Afghans, if they had their consent in it, we wouldn't have been in a state where we are. And it's too sad that we are still to realize this. We still think this is a social contract, and this should be implemented because it's a contract. If it was a social contract, we would have not been living in a barbaric society, just like Hobbes states it, which is brutal, savage, and nasty. These three words in his book, Leviathan. And this is where we are today. So I don't think this is a social contract. I think this is Alibaba and 40 thieves.
You know, that's quite accurate, because sadly, if we observe what is going on right now in Kabul, it is shocking how people are selling literally all their furniture at home. You know, those fancy flats and mansions, those hideous buildings built, they start somewhere, you know, the Charaya Haji Qadir from Mikroyan onwards. If you just drive all towards Shashdarak, and then from that moment onwards, it begins. You know, all those ugly buildings where all these powerful people live, all the way to Taimani. All these people in those houses, there are so many houses for sale right now, so many properties for sale, and if the value of those buildings a year ago was maybe 500,000 or even more, now you can buy some of those properties for 25,000. It means they really behave like thieves. They see Americans leaving and they're already packing bags and they're trying to leave as well. They're selling their furniture, their dishes, their clothing closets, etc.
Washing machines.
Yes, it's really embarrassing, and it's also very offensive for the remaining 6-7 million people who live in Kabul. Mm-hmm. It's offensive because they're being sort of abandoned by the people who were supposed to run the show. Anyways, I wanted to move on to something that is more urgent right now. I don't know if you guys have seen the latest news. It's not the latest news anymore right now, but it is said that the Americans have requested from the Taliban that they should not attack U.S. embassy. Have you guys read that report? It was in the New York Times. Okay. What does it mean if the New York Times publishes a story where the Americans have allegedly, or they probably have, not allegedly, asked the Taliban not to attack their embassy and keep it intact? What does that mean? Habib, first, I want to hear from you. What does that mean?
Yes. So I have a little bit of humor first.
Okay, please.
Regarding the last conversation, and then I'll come to this question. You know what happens is when we talked about the government, rather than responding to real issues, you know, their strategic machinery will come up with having a Twitter drive, a campaign, which is irrelevant. It doesn't solve the problem. which takes me to a story where a friend had come from the West back in the days 2003, 2004. Was working with an NGO, an international NGO, and back then you had a scarcity of electricity in Kabul. So you would rarely have electricity for quite a few hours and then it would be gone, just like recently. Okay, so and back then you rarely had laptops. You would run those desktop computers that required a lot of electricity. So the electricity power would be too weak for your refrigerator to run. Okay, so they would have those machines, those stabilizers, to ensure that it gets enough electricity to run that refrigerator, because summers in Kabul gets really hot and you need some ice and cold water. And the problem was that those desktops would not run on the general electricity, so you would require a stabilizer for that as well. One day this friend comes home and his son, which was about 7, 8 years old, is playing on the desktop some video game. And when he opens the refrigerator, he realizes that there is no cold water and the refrigerator has been off. Because what the son had done was he has taken the plug out of the refrigerator and is using the stabilizer for the desktop computer. So he goes to his son, that son, why have you done that? You know it's too hot and you shouldn't be playing game on your computer. Abdullah, why have you done that? And his son is like, Daddy, Laila hasn't gone to school either. You know, so it's two different things. You know, he's trying to transfer that accountability for his elder sister Laila not going to school and reporting that to his father so that she could get in trouble as well. And this is what the government is doing at the moment, not responding to the real issues. Coming back to Americans asking the Taliban for protection of its embassy, I think that does make sense, because from what I understand, that the Americans would not want to leave their diplomatic presence in Afghanistan, no matter what. And part of that ambition would mean reaching out to the Taliban, which also means that even the Americans have realized the potential of Taliban taking over Kabul. Sounds scary, but it could not be far from reality. So, which does make sense to me. In light of evac plan and plan Bs and the what they call them the contingency plans. I think I even read a report where the American embassy might get even shifted from its current location to HKIA, which is the Hamid Karzai International Airport. I even read a news that you might have 3,000 American troops coming within the next 24 to 48 hours to the HKIA, the Hamid Karzai International Airport, which would be basically tasked to ensuring a safe evac for its diplomatic staff in light of if the Taliban breaches the protocol, or if they're in threat or something, so that evac could happen smoothly. Yes, it does absolutely make sense. The initial forecast was that 3 months, and in light of these recent developments, which has shocked everybody, not me personally, I think now they're even talking about weeks before they're at the gates of Kabul.
I was speaking to someone today, and they were like, oh, basically, I had said sort of months. I'll go out there. I'm personally myself shocked. I think even I overestimated the strength of the government. Even I, which perhaps is surprising. But I was speaking to someone today, and they said, "Oh, I thought you were just being, too pessimistic when you said months. I thought it would take years." But it turns out that I was completely on the wrong side, and you were somewhat in the middle. But yeah, this is taken the stuff, like, if let's really think about this, okay? Something like in the last week, so about 7 days, 12 provinces.
I think now 14.
14, because we're speaking as news is unfolding, and we'll get to some of that news in a bit. So Sangar, I'm going to ask you, we'll talk about sort of military strategy. Okay. Can you please bring out the map of Sunday?
Yeah, we'll try. Okay. Okay, so we have. Let me add our guest as well. Where is he?
Yeah, Alta Pamabain ki watcha.
Samada. One moment, please. Okay, so
I don't know. This is my personal favorite part of the live stream. I know I'm not the only one.
You guys, you have to bear with us. We will in future we won't have these embarrassing moments. Okay, I promise you. Okay.
Oh, Sangar Dasi catch.
I got it. I got the latest map.
Yawari the Sunday ka au bia the nani razida catch rami nanjor kadayu.
Okay, so I will do this one is Sunday. Sunday. Okay.
Yeah, guys, one of the downsides of being freelancers and doing this independently in our own time has its perks. The downsides is that we don't actually have a sort of an organized IT team, so we have to kind of do this stuff, on the job.
Okay.
If we can call it that.
All right.
So this is, guys,
is
you can see Sunday's map. So that is basically the situation. So you can see the southwestern province has a Talib flag flying above it. In the north, you have a province with a Talib flag flying above it, and in the northeast, right? The rest of the cities, as you can see from the key, are either under threat of being besieged or attacked, under total or partial siege, or the provincial capitals are not under immediate siege. So we can see that, right? Yeah, there's Habib. Brilliant to see him again. And now Sangar, the Nenu Razida
Said. Okay. So that's today.
So the people in the live chat are saying there's audio.
There is no audio?
Sorry, there's echo. Oh, there's echo with me.
Yeah, I see what's going on here. Okay.
Does Margonade?
No, I think now is the echo is gone.
Okay.
Yes.
So guys, that is today's map. Okay. So as we spoke earlier, Kandahar, it seems, has been entirely taken. Okay, Waleed is echoing.
No, I think the echo is gone. I know exactly what's going on, but it's gone. It's solved.
So what we can see is that Badakhshan, Takhar, Baghlan, Kunduz, Saripul, Jawzjan, what's the other one? Jawzjan. Shibirkhan is in Jawzjan. Which one is that one? I forgot.
It's getting too late, Waleed.
Yeah. My Nakhsha in my head isn't working that well. But we spoke about Badris also falling, and we're coming to the west.
Yes.
Herat,
Farah
has fallen. Nimroz had already fallen. Kandahar and Ghazni. So that is the situation. Someone is asking Zaranj. Zaranj is basically the border crossing in the southwest that you see. Just between, Zaranj is the border crossing between south and west.
Next to Sangar's face, that's Zaranj, capital of Nimroz.
So that is the situation. So we've basically got a lot of these provinces under firm Talib control. The other ones, we mentioned Tirinkot and we mentioned Uruzgan. Those are currently totally or partially besieged, and we're expecting that they too will collapse to the Taliban in the coming hours, if not days. So that is the situation. So now I'm going to posit a question to Habib. Someone's asking Lashkargah, has it fallen yet? There's a battle sign above Lashkargah. the two swords against each other, and that is we're basically hearing that the majority of the city has been taken over, and that it's also expected that Lashkargah will also fall to the Taliban in its totality, in its entirety, in the coming hours. But we're yet to receive confirmation of that. Now I'm going to posit a question to Habib. Right, so Habiba, we know that initially there was pressure building up around cities like Kandahar, Kunduz, and Herat, in and around Kandahar, Kunduz, and Herat, right? And then, seemingly out of nowhere, we got attacks on Lashkargah and on Herat simultaneously, just as we thought that the Taliban would attack Kandahar, right? Lashkargah was heavily bombarded. Herat was the site of fighting between Amir Ismail Khan. And then we got a couple of northern provinces falling, such as Jozjan, Shibirghan being the provincial capital, Zaranj, Takhar. And then we got Kunduz, Badakhshan, what's it called? Baghlan, right? Now, is it accurate? Because once again, I'm positing this question to you. You've studied security, you've worked in the Afghan Ministry of Defense. Is it plausible to say that what the Taliban did was that they were aware that the backbone to the government was not the regular army, but the special forces? Knowing that the special forces were limited in number, they essentially launched partial incursions into cities, expecting that the government would launch some airstrikes here and there, and then attacked where they weren't expected, basically overstretching the government and leading to the collapse of provinces. From a military standpoint solely, we'll talk about the political and the local deals, but from a solely military perspective, is that a plausible sort of analogy or a rationalization of what's happened?
So what I would say, Walijana, if you study the emergence of Taliban back in 90s, they started from a specific region down south from Kandahar, and they started expanding. All right. Now, back then, what they were doing, they were fighting anarchy. Everybody had their own government, and every different province had a different government.
There were a dozen governments in Kandahar alone.
Now you have a central government that is in Kabul, which basically has different core commander units across the country. Now, starting from one specific location and then expanding from that location would not make sense. It'll be difficult. That's the military mindset. Because the idea is that you cannot have a conventional warfare. What you need to do is you expand on the territory that you have, go to different pockets of the country, and then expand there.
Okay.
And just about a few months ago, when they started taking over different checkposts and subsequently districts, they were making headlines. I said it'll be not very far that they will take over quite a few provinces. So by the whole motive was taking over those districts. You wanted to have the provincial centers cut off from those cores, not Kabul, from the cores where it belonged to. For example, the northern core, which is located in Mazar, basically responds to quite a few provinces in the north.
Yeah.
So you take over those districts and cut off the city, the provincial capital, from the main core that it is responsible to. Number two is that you're not going to start from one point. You're going to. So remember when they took over Kunduz a few years back, Ghazni, and then Farah briefly a few years back. Now those were small incidents where they briefly took over a provincial capital. They had to retreat because of air support, and then the commandos going, and then the ANA, the ANDSF going from core and supporting that specific provincial capital. This time, this is not going to happen because they're already cut off. So road logistics will not happen. Whatever that's going to happen is your special operating forces. And they cannot have them brought all of them to one specific capital because because now they're everywhere in all of those pockets. They've cut off and they're going to start all together in all directions. Now, what happens in Kabul, those strategists, they don't have the experience. Majority of them are Fulbrighters who have zero level understanding, they get lost. So where do we go first? But wherever do you go first is not going to have much of an impact. You will be able to contain the offense of the Taliban for 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, a week, maybe 2 weeks. But after that, what is next? It is eventually going to fall.
Okay, I've got another question here, right? Because you alluded to something that is crucial that people have been talking about a lot. So you're aware, just as Sangar is, that since 2014, when Ashraf Ghani has come into power, it's sort of been strong central state enforcing the writ of the state, making the government, the sole arbiter, the sole power, right? Now, that obviously has meant that the government has gone after the warlords, right? And now none of us here like the warlords, to put it frankly, right? But in doing so, is it not the case that by isolating the warlords who could provide more of a militarily proficient response, right? That the Ashraf Ghani has shot himself in the foot, as evidenced by the fact that he's made overtures to Ustad Atta, Amir Ismail Khan, Marshal Dostum. So, sort of, can it not be argued almost from a pro Ashraf Ghani perspective that on the one hand, the warlords are the political cause of the insurgency. They're politically problematic. But on the downside, relying on, as you said, the Fulbrighters is militarily problematic. Is there not a case to be made there?
So, that is the case, absolutely. Those Fulbrighters could have been used in altogether different capacities. But how they were utilized were not what they were actually built for.
Okay.
So you bring in somebody who becomes the deputy defense minister, who, for example, at that point of time did not know where Jaram was located, or, for example, where Aryub Zozai is located.
Now that's unforgivable.
So, and then you bring in somebody, with all due respect, um, somebody who was from the opposite gender, a lady who was running a policy department in the Ministry of Mines and Petroleum. Mm-hmm. And the next day she is the deputy minister of policy for the Ministry of Interior. Or somebody who was a project manager in the local governance, a UNDP funded project. Suddenly she is the deputy defense minister, while you are in a state of war. So the question was, how do you utilize these people? Yes, when it comes to project management, when it comes to probably a medium level policy making, yes, an essay, a research paper, a feasibility study, yes. But when you're handing them over the responsibility of the entire country, now you are inviting yourself trouble.
And was isolating the warlords a mistake in your view? Because I want to hear your view on it, because it's a complicated question.
And Sanjarjana, I would say your statement has to be rectified. Warlords were never isolated.
Okay. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I'm talking about the ringleaders, the big boys. We're talking about Ustad Atta, we're talking about Amir Ismail Khan, we're talking about General Dostum or Marshal Dostum. So, was isolating these people a problem?
So General Dostum was made deputy president, first vice president, until he got Amrullah Saleh on side. And then he gave them, when he was not in his side, he gave them all of what he wanted, a title of field marshal, his daughter becoming the elected member of the upper house, his son becoming a
unelected member of the upper house.
Unelected, yes. So you're giving them whatever they ever desired for. You're giving, yes, Ustad Atta was not there. He did not hold any government position, but his son did. Mm-hmm. And this is how it's a combination of Alibaba and 40 Thieves and then kleptocracy. So yes, so he tried to have um, two watermelons in one hand, and he did that actually. He did that. He had the Western educated people who could have been utilized much better and different portfolios, and then they basically handed them over the fate of the entire country. And I'm being very brutal honest about it. Somebody who has a PhD in animation from Brunel University becomes your national security advisor.
Okay, just to move towards
Catastrophes.
what is now going on in Afghanistan, we have now tried to explain what has caused this sudden collapse of many different parts of the country. And as Habib Wardak brilliantly explained, this could have been and this was predicted years ago. Okay? We will come back to this issue again in future episodes. There are articles in the pipeline about some of the major mistakes or miscalculations or flat out blunders of the last couple of years. They will be published soon, inshallah. But I want to ask both of you to draw a picture of what you expect to happen in the next 7 days, because it's crucial.
Before drawing a picture, there's also a report that I think wait, let me, because I got sent it whilst we were live.
Something happened while we were on air.
So the news breaking, a reliable source that says that tonight in a telephone conversation with Mohammad Ashraf Ghani, the US Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense asked him to resign in order to allow a ceasefire and formation of a transitional government.
Well, John, if you remember, I had texted you a little bit earlier that I heard that Ghani is going to be scooting.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this what you just read is from an Iranian journalist of The Independent. So I wouldn't really say that that's the most reliable source, and this person is also not mentioning their source. So how credible is this?
Well, I'm not really acquainted with the journalist, but someone has sent it to me. But it is making the rounds. But in any case,
okay, Habib, what is in your opinion? How credible is this?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, given that it's from Independent, and where Independent comes from, and the source of Independent, Independent foresee. So and to be honest, it's not about Independent. Sometimes you hear things. Does it really correspond with reality? And I think it does correspond. I wouldn't be shocked to know if it was true.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, before we move on, Habib, how long can you stay with us, or is your time up?
I'll be here for just another 5 minutes, and I'm expecting to go out and meet a friend. I'll have to leave my two friends over here.
Okay.
Just to give you a sort of what do I expect in terms of the next 7 days. I don't know, but I can say the next 4 to 5 weeks. At the pace that we are going, I think minimum 20 to 22 provinces completely will fall into the hands of Taliban. I think that is, I'm very, very positive that we might have some sort of news in terms of a breakthrough in Doha, because that might push the government in Kabul come to some sort of senses, and hopefully Taliban will also oblige. Something will come out of negotiations, or we will have some positive sort of developments coming from Doha. Now, if there is no positive developments coming from Doha, then the end game seems very, very brutal far more brutal. Kabul has never fall into the hands of the opposition militarily, whether it was in 1992. It did not fall into the hands of the opposition militarily. The Mujahideen amongst themselves fought over Kabul for a long time, destroyed it, burned it to the ground, and then you had the emergence of Taliban. It was handed over to the Taliban without much of a fight. So I don't know this time. All of the resources will be brought down to Kabul. Um, if I imagine the siege of Kabul, I don't want to see Kabul destroyed. It's home to about 5 million population. It's a massive population. It's going to be a disaster. And I really hope we don't get to see that. That is all I can say at the moment.
Okay.
No worries.
Well, Habib, thank you very much for accepting our invitation on such short notice. And I do mean very short notice. I am very happy to have you. It's always a pleasure to hear your perspective. I just wanted to know, Waleed and I, we have decided to do this every night because of all the unraveling that is going on in Afghanistan right now. I would love to know, are you available in the upcoming few days to...
Yes, so Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, I'm always available.
Okay, so we can count on you?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, guys, in the chat, you heard it. Habib Wardak, who is, according to many of the messages we've received from you guys so far, one of our favorite guests so far. He is going to, he has pledged to be with us on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You give me your word? Okay, this is
absolutely.
excellent.
And there's just one other thing I want to add here, and I know that sort of even culturally we don't really praise people to their faces, but this isn't sort of Mali. This isn't me trying to kiss up to Habib, but like everyone here has obviously listened to the insights and the analysis that he's brought, and it's not sort of a coincidence. We're talking about someone who was, albeit shortly, an official at the Afghan Ministry of Defense. So this is just, I guess, shameless self-promotion.
Yes.
Don't miss out on our live streams.
Okay,
because
Habib, if you have to run, because I don't want to hold you. We will just wrap this up with our audience, okay? Again, dera mana kurdi wadan жвандају се хашпадр та غواړم په مخه دی ښه
په مخه دی ښه خدای په امان
الله دې مل شي سلام علیکم. Okay, guys in the chat, I really want to apologize for the entirely chaotic show so far, and you obviously know, we've said it already, it's due to the fact that we decided to do a live show just
there's sort of a white screen over my face.
No, that's not over your face. That's the wall behind you. Okay, guys, I want to tell our dear audience, our dear listeners, people who are still with us, I'm going to sort out the technical side of this live show. Okay, I'm responsible for that. I'm going to make sure that everything is taken care of, and so that we don't have any glitches. And I've also made sure that I no longer rely on wireless internet. I'm actually using a cable for more stability, so I'm going back old school. Okay, so I want to make I want to put a little more effort in making sure that we have a decent show where we can have guests, brilliant guests like Habib Wardak, and we can talk about issues. We didn't have a script today. We didn't really prepare any questions. This was just a very spontaneous...
Some of us cancelled plans.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Things are changing on a sort of a daily, hourly basis. But what I'm going to say is that, there isn't any other platform of which I'm aware that offers in the English language sort of a level of analysis, dissection of unveiling Afghan affairs. On Twitter, there's obviously a lot of misinformation, and as Habib Wardak alluded to, there's a lot of propaganda. The social media war being fought is very brutal to some extent. And it's even worse on Instagram than it is on Twitter. Now, obviously, the problem is that the government in Kabul doesn't seem to realize that propaganda is supposed to be information or misinformation, depending on how you see it, is supposed to be supplementary to actual warfare. What we've got right now is a government collapsing on sort of all sides, as we saw in the maps that we've demonstrated. But some of the ideas or some of the things that are being put out there are still there, and they're gaining currency. So for that reason, it's very necessary for us to be able to dissect these issues as unaffiliated analysts who are sort of focusing on Afghanistan and bringing a certain level of expertise. But now here, look, what I want to say, right? And I went on a bit of a rant earlier when I was talking about my family. What I want to say is that we started the AFGHANEYE. I remember, right? For those who are new here, I'm going to briefly go over the story. It was sort of, we were in the midst of US Taliban negotiations right at the end. And I sort of told Sangar, look, there's a lot going on. There isn't a counter narrative being provided. Let's make a website, right? Sangar's answer to me was, why don't you make it yourself? So I went and I made it myself. And then Sangar, realizing that I was actually serious, got energized and thought, you know what, let's collaborate, let's make this website. The podcast, the live stream, all of it was an accident, right? It wasn't planned. It just happened as it went along. The equipment that you see, it was all donated, paid for by donations from our loyal listeners and viewers. Now, from the beginning, so our platform is not even 2 years old. It's not even 1.5 years old, right? But from the beginning, Sangar and I were very noticeably optimistic, maybe even naively optimistic about the Doha deal, the peace process, and whatever. And we mentioned earlier that that was because we know what war is. Now, alhamdulillah ta'ala, we grew up, I mean, I'm speaking for myself here. Sangar is older than me, and he didn't actually grow up in a peaceful environment. But we grew up, at least in families, to whom war was a ever-present reality, who knew the sheer terror, the smoke, the blood, the dust of war. We grew up with that, and because of that, we were always optimistic about the Doha peace process. Now, as I also alluded to earlier, we got a lot of criticism for that. We got a lot of name calling. Some of it was perhaps, people being naive, not understanding the larger issues at play. Afghanistan is an issue about which Afghans are understandably emotional. There were also a lot of, and we didn't give them much attention, but a lot of foul accusations that were made. There was slander. There was sort of outright smearing for the sole purpose that we thought and we believed that there was no military solution to the conflict. That is an opinion that I still hold. And I said earlier, this isn't the time to say, I told you so, but you know what? I'm going to say it. For the people that are still insistent on calling us names, for the people that are, they're willing to do anything but look at themselves in the mirror, or as we say in Pashto, to look down at themselves, who are still, as we say in Pashto, they forced 2 feet in one shoe, who are still insistent on, doing everything possible to sort of disrupt the advent of sort of a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Here's what I'm going to say. We told you so. We told you in March 2020 that you have 14 months of an American presence left, in which your negotiating position will be stronger. Your negotiating position gets weaker. The Kabul's negotiating position gets weaker every single day. Whilst the American troops are here, because that is your leverage, utilize it. Get an arrangement, get an agreement with the Taliban. You may hate them, we may hate them, other people may hate you. But once the Americans leave, and if you screw this up, it's going to get ugly. And guess what? It got ugly. We spoke about my family earlier, but you know what? My family, to the extent that I know, I don't know about them right now, they were okay people have died, right? Hundreds, if not thousands, of civilians have lost their lives. Hundreds of thousands are displaced. Soldiers have died. And for what? For a conclusion, as Habib spoke, as a former official at the Afghan Ministry of Defense has pointed out, the government's days look to be limited. There are reports that the Americans, who are the patrons of the current government, are asking it to step down. And now I'm going to say all of that, all of the propaganda campaigns, all of the op-eds in international media, all of the red lines and the gains of the last 20 years, where did it get you or us as a country? It got us more people dead. It got us, infrastructure destroyed. It got hundreds of thousands of people displaced. There are videos of Afghans from 2001 screaming, saying, "You should have killed us rather than making us displaced and refugees." This, if the political situation settles itself, if we, inshallah ta'ala, get to a political resolution of the conflict, which, we hope and we aim and we pray for, because the Taliban are one faction, the most powerful faction, but one faction. One faction cannot monopolize power. But let's say this is, let's say tomorrow we have a new government, everything is okay, not a bullet is fired. What are we going to do about the hundreds of thousands of people that are displaced in the middle of a pandemic? And I want to end it on that note. We sort of we knew what was coming, right? We knew what was coming. It's really painful that it got to this stage where people are living in tents or people are living out in the open. People don't know what's happening to their families. And yeah, that's a rant. I'm not really emotional or angry on the podcast. A lot of people have criticized me for being too cold and rational. But if at a certain point, the lid comes off, right? And it's not even, it gives me no satisfaction to say I told you so, absolutely none. Because when thousands of people are dying and hundreds of thousands are displaced, where is the satisfaction? But we are where we are. And it's like Habib said, it's still not too late. It can get worse than this. And I pray to God that it doesn't. And I pray to God that we do see some sort of wisdom on all sides. We see some sort of political will on all sides.
Okay, Waleed, thank you very much. I will also mention some of our dear friends in the chat. First of all, Sabur Ahmed, brother, thank you very much for promoting our live stream, for being with us throughout this whole conversation. I really appreciate everyone who is still listening and people who value our work and support us. This means a lot to us, because we, at the end of the day, we feel like what we are trying to do here is necessary. And when we see people who I look up to, like Sabur Ahmed, I'm going to be honest, I look up to you. I have watched all your videos. All my friends watch your videos. Some of my dear friends, they have learned so much about Islam just by watching your videos. And to know that you sit throughout the whole show, listen to our podcast, and you promote us, it's an honor, and I really appreciate that. And I hope that we can do better and produce better content. And who knows, maybe we can do a show together someday. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for all your patience with us. Thanks for being with us throughout.
I've only got one last thing to say.
All right.
If you agree with our ethos of providing a counter narrative to what you see on Twitter, to what you see in the mainstream media, if you are bored about the international community talking about Afghans on the behalf of Afghans, if you believe in a freelance media project in which two people who are unaffiliated, who are not sponsored by shady organizations with ideological vendettas, who do not want to have Afghanistan as a perpetual ideological laboratory, if you don't want all of those things, if you're sick and tired of those things, please consider subscribing to our, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Do follow us on Twitter. And do follow us on Instagram.
Like the video, guys. Like the
video, because if you like the video, more people will see it. And if you want to go above and beyond, please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon, or donating to us directly on PayPal. Inshallah ta'ala, we aim to see you soon with good news. Yeah, there's someone saying Dogecoin to the Sporgme.
We accept Dogecoin.
But yeah, please and we aim, inshallah ta'ala, to see you soon, but more importantly, with good news.
All right.
Wassalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.